NACD, and this is our applicant webinar for the Historically Underserved Farmer to Farmer Outreach Grants Program, which is administered on behalf of the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division. So this is our informational webinar for interested applicants, potentially for partners as well. If you're here to get more information about the program, and ask us any questions that you might have at the end of our presentation. So I'm going to get started. And I will hand it over to Jen.
Thanks, Chloe. I really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Nelligan. I'm the Chief Program Officer at NACD. We're really excited about this program and the opportunities that it provides to our districts, to partners, as well as producers. Chloe will get into a lot of the details, both in terms of, what the appropriate use of funds are and, the types of projects that EPA is looking for. But bottom line is that we're really hoping that these projects go a long way in building local partnerships and getting innovative conservation projects on the ground that mitigate the hypoxic conditions in the Gulf of Mexico. So I'm not sure if we have any of our EPA partners on today, but many thanks to EPA for this opportunity to administer the program and the opportunity to work with you all, hopefully, on it as well. So we're really excited about all that's to come and the types of projects and partnerships that we'll see in the coming months. So with that, I'll pass it back to Chloe, and thank you everyone for your time today.
Great, awesome. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so here is our agenda. Let me just say really quick, sorry, I should have mentioned this at the top, but if you could place yourself on mute when you come in, that would be really helpful. We're getting a little bit of feedback, so thank you for those of us who just joined, and we are recording this, so if you want to share it later, that's also great. So our agenda today, we'll start off with our welcome, which we just did. We'll get into the scope and objectives of the program, talk a little bit about outcomes and outputs and the difference between those. Then we'll discuss quality assurance plans, walk through the application process, provide you with resources and where you can ask for help, and then we'll open it up for questions. So just a note, if you have questions throughout the presentation, just please put those questions into the chat, and then we'll answer the questions at the end of the presentation. So this new program with EPA Gulf of Mexico Division is working with 4 different partners actually to solicit proposals that will provide for Native American and historically underserved farmer-to-farmer outreach and on-the-ground projects that will mitigate hypoxic conditions in the Gulf of Mexico. So you can see here, this map shows the different areas that are covered by the 4 different partners. So the other 3 partners, in addition to NACD, are Windrock International, NASDA, and the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. So this map kind of lays out the different regions that each partner is covering. So through NACD, if you were applying through NACD, the areas would be in Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, and then some portions of Florida, Georgia, New Mexico, and Colorado. There is a very detailed list of all of the counties that are eligible for all 4 of our partners' programs in the RFA. So if you'd like to see that detailed list, you can take a look at that at the end of the RFA. But if you are within any of these regions, maybe not necessarily through the NACD covered regions, we also have access to our partners program pages on our NACD webpage, but that's something you could also reach out to us about if you had any questions. Eligible applicants for this program are conservation districts, conservation districts' respective state associations or their state agencies, and resource conservation and development councils, as well as Indian tribal governments or intertribal consortiums. So yeah, geographical and organizational eligibility requirements. The objectives of this program are to work directly with Native American or historically underserved producers on novel or innovative techniques, methods, or approaches. Oop. If you're unmuted, could you please mute yourself, please? Thank you. Approaches that reduce non-point source pollution and increase the sustainability and resiliency of their operations. A big part of this program will be to leverage partnerships, specifically working with underserved groups or Native American groups to increase knowledge sharing and collaboration within and among those communities. And if you are a potential partner, or if you have any potential partners that you would like to have them looped into these conversations and potentially connected with conservation districts or state agencies that they could work with, we do have this form here, this partner contact form that you could fill out, or you could reach out to us directly. We will be sharing these slides on the website, so you will have access to any links available in these slides. Another objective would be to collect and analyze the data to demonstrate the results of funded projects. So important to have quantifiable data that can be disseminated and have plans for collecting and disseminating that data. So the last objective, to disseminate those results to the community and to inform future conservation or management practices and expand adoption of the most cost-effective and sustainable approaches. So it's important to underscore that this work should benefit historically underserved producers, and that the objectives of this project are intended to advance equity, and specifically as part of the Biden administration's Justice 40 goal, which is a goal that they put out for the federal government, that 40% of their overall benefits in grant investments would flow towards disadvantaged communities. So this is kind of in part contributing to that Justice 40 goal, and that's part of the justification for this program. And so it's a significant priority. So in terms of technical outcomes, applications must include at least one of the following: water quality initiatives, habitat restoration initiatives, or sustainable forest management initiatives. So the RFA does include many examples, but just to give you a few examples, water quality initiatives would be things such as nutrient reduction, ground cover to limit erosion, planting field buffers, transitioning to low or no-till operations, managing livestock access to streams, etc. Other examples for habitat restoration initiatives, riparian zone improvement, observing environmental windows, restoration or protection of wildlife corridors, partner easements, landowner habitat planting or restoration. There's other examples for that as well in the RFA. And then sustainable forest management initiatives could include utilizing sustainable forestry practices, improving utilization of sustainable forestry practices through training and education, public outreach, monitoring effectiveness of those practices, etc. And then in terms of the outreach aspect and the partnership aspect of this program, applications must also include both of the following. So collaboration with partner organizations, replicating existing successes in watersheds, building stakeholder and farmer capacity through technical training or outreach, potentially including awards to local farmer organizations, demonstrating techniques to other farmer organizations, working with farmer-led organizations or consortiums, reaching out to small farms, overcoming barriers for farmers who are facing technological, financial, or other challenges in adopting nutrient reduction practices. And then in terms of sustainable and resilient agriculture operations, some examples might include identifying vulnerabilities to climate-related risks, including understanding potential exposures to weather variability, drought, or flooding, exploring social, economic, cultural, and technical implementation challenges, and other things of that nature. So for the outreach component, both of these aspects must be included. So let's just talk briefly about outputs and outcomes. You'll be required to list both outputs and outcomes as part of your application. Outputs are the deliverables or the actual activity or effort that's associated with the work. So those must be measurable and they must be related to an environmental goal. So typically, so I guess, for example, an output would be the number of acres that you worked on, or the number of riparian buffers that were planted, or the number of underserved producers that were reached. So applicants will list those anticipated outputs in your pre-application, and then your final application will include the target metrics, so those specific numbers, and then the quarterly milestones that will demonstrate progress towards your target. There's more examples in the RFA of technical and social outputs in addition to the ones that I had mentioned. So environmental outcomes, on the other hand, are the actual results or effects that occur from carrying out this program or activity. So perhaps the activity would be the number of BMPs implemented in a certain area, or that would be the output. The outcome would be the actual water quality improvements that would be seen because of that activity. So outcomes can be qualitative and they could be environmental, behavior, or health related or programmatic, but they have to be quantifiable in some way. So you have to have some way that you can show that the outcome has occurred and also that it's related to the output or the activity that you're connecting it to. So outcomes can be short term, they can be intermediate, or they can be long term. So thinking in terms of behavioral outcomes. So let's say your output was to reach a certain number of underserved farmers or producers. The outcome could be that now they show that they have a change in their understanding or their knowledge or their attitude. That would be a short-term outcome. An intermediate outcome in that example would be that they actually change their behavior, they implement a certain practice on their farm. Long-term change would be more of that environmental change, so showing that change in water quality or improvement in condition of a natural resource. So applicants will list those anticipated outcomes in the pre-application, and then in their final application, they'll include the target metrics. So technical outcomes must include at least one of the following. So acres and the type of habitat enhanced or restored, and improvement of at least one water quality parameter. So as I had said, potentially the reduction of nutrients, turbidity, total suspended solids, etc. Other technical outcomes could include pollutant load reductions in the Gulf of Mexico and the number of pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, or sediment discharge avoided. Social outcomes can include improvements made to state, county, or local environmental programs, requirements or policies to better protect public health and the environment, or improved collective knowledge about more efficient farming practices resulting in reduced pollution. So it's important to keep in mind when thinking about your metrics, both the outputs and the outcomes, that you will be required to create a quality assurance plan, so a sub-award quality assurance plan. And this will serve as a blueprint for collecting and validating the data for your project. So your plan will have to be improved, or I'm sorry, it will have to be approved before you can initiate your data collection. So just make sure that if you need an expedited process for that approval, if you're going to need to collect data quickly, let us know so that we can work with you to expedite the approval of your quality assurance plan. We will work with you to finalize and approve your quality assurance plans as well. As part of our agreement with the EPA, NACD will have an umbrella quality assurance plan. And then all of our applicants will have to describe their approach to developing their quality assurance plan in the final application. So your final quality assurance plans must be submitted within 45 days of award. You'll have to have a plan for developing your quality assurance plan as part of your final application, not part of the pre-application. This link here will take you to EPA's guidelines for quality assurance plans. So some basic elements of a quality assurance plan. This also, I believe, is listed in the RFA, but you'll have to understand who will use the data, what's the project goals and objectives, what decisions will be informed by this data, how, when, and where the information will be acquired. So you'll have to list your methodology and the instruments that you'll use, what possible problems might arise, what actions can be taken to mitigate the impact of those risks. The type and quantity and quality of data must be specified, how good the data has to be in order to support the decision that it would inform, and how the data will be analyzed, assessed, and reported. So it's really important that when you're thinking again about your metrics, outputs, and outcomes, that you will be able to verify your data and have statistically valid data. So even though you aren't required to submit that quality assurance plan as part of the pre-application, it's something that you'll probably want to start thinking about when you're trying to think about the outputs and the outcomes that you're presenting. So here is a quick timeline of the application process. So we are right here at the beginning, March 7th, the applicant webinar. The second webinar will be held on the 21st. So if you have any partners or colleagues that weren't able to attend this webinar, you can direct them to the 21st or to the recording. April 21st are when pre-applications are due. And then between May 1st and May 12th, we'll be sharing pre-applications with partners in order to encourage more collaboration amongst partners in different regions, and also just reviewing for eligibility. So the pre-applications will not be evaluated. They will be shared and circulated. On June 9th is when the final applications will be due. Between June 12th and August 18th, applications will be evaluated formally. On August 31st, we will notify selected applicants, and on October 30th will be the final award date. So we talked a little bit about this, but I just wanted to explicitly outline some of the different expectations between pre-application and final application. The pre-application, as I had just said, will be circulated to encourage match and partnerships, but it won't be evaluated. The final application will be evaluated based on the criteria in the RFA. Just really briefly, the evaluation criteria will be 45% social impacts, 45% technical impacts, and 10% cost effectiveness and budget. So just to reiterate, those social impacts and the partnerships and collaboration, specifically with underserved and Native American producers, is just as important as the technical aspects for this project. The pre-application will not require identifying risks or barriers or providing mitigation plans, as we had discussed, but it's something you might want to think about, because in your final application, you will be required to identify those explicitly. In the pre-application, you'll describe the types of partners that you're seeking and what their anticipated role will be. When you get to the final application, you'll have to provide a finalized list of those partners and their finalized roles. Pre-application, you'll have to provide your proposed outputs and outcomes, but you will not have to provide a quality assurance plan. Of course, it's something, like I said, you should be considering, because in your final application, you will be required to provide that quality assurance plan, and also how you will disseminate results. Sorry if you can hear a loud cat. In the pre-application, you aren't required to submit a budget. and your match information will not be required, but it's something you'll also want to keep in mind based on what allowable costs are. The completed budget and match information will be required in the final application. Did someone just say something to me? Or was it just not on mute? Okay. Okay. So I think just a quick note is that the pre-application is not being evaluated because we are specifically hoping to use that stage as a way to circulate and encourage the match between partners. And this is the first time that we are using the pre-application phase. And so it's something that we might be looking for feedback on as well. And so this is also meant to kind of help you in the sense that it's an abbreviated process, so we can have the information sufficient for partners to express their interest and to find collaboration amongst partners through the pre-application phase. And then the final application phase will reflect the partnership's goals and approach with more detail. So also, I think I'll note that match is not required, but it's something that will be considered in evaluation. So just quickly to go over the funding, individual awards will be between $75,000 and $250,000. So we expect to award 10 to 36 grants. The total funding available for grants is $2.7 million. So as I just said, no cost sharing or match is required. It's not a condition of eligibility, but it will be considered during evaluation, and the budget will be submitted during final application. But you should take a look at the RFA to see allowable costs, and make sure that your activities will fall within those allowable costs, and determine where you might be asking for funding from us versus where you might be providing match or seeking funding from partners. Just really quick, I'll just walk through where you're going to find the program webpage. If you go onto our website, you go down through what we do and then over through water. And then it's at the bottom there, historically underserved farmer to farmer outreach. When you're on the homepage, there's a button here to view the request for applications. And then when you actually want to submit your application, you can click this button here to take you through the live form. One thing I'll note is in the RFA, you'll be able to see a preview of the pre-application and the final application. So if you'd like to look there to figure out what questions you're going to be answering before you go into the live form, then you should definitely check that out first. And then when you're ready to submit them through the live form, you can do that. So there's how you access the live form. And here's a quick preview of what the live form looks like. It's essentially going to be all the same information that's on that pre-application preview that's in the appendices of the RFA. So you'll just take that information and plug it in here. You will have the option to save and continue later. So don't feel like you necessarily have to do it all at once. Yeah, I think that covers that. And I think that's it. I kind of breezed through a lot of information, and I'm fairly new to all of this as well. So if I kind of went over something too quickly, or if you had questions about something and you need more detail, please ask your questions in the text boxes or the chat box. And yeah, I think here's my contact information. So if you'd like to contact me with questions, please write that down. Or you can share it with anybody who's interested in the program and wants to reach out. But other than that, I guess I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Chloe. This is Meg Leader from NACD, and I'll be reading to Chloe your questions that are coming in the chat box, and we do have one typing in there. I do want to mention that on the web page will be posted the recording of today's webinar. So where it now says to register, that button will be changed to a link to the recording. A few slides back mentioned quality assurance. What will that entail? Is it for implementing conservation practices?
Okay, yeah, I'll give a stab at answering it, and then if Jen or Meg want to step in, you can. But a quality assurance plan is a plan for how you'll collect your data and how you'll ensure that your data is sound, essentially. So you'll have to think about all the aspects in this list here. And basically put together a plan for all of the ways that you'll collect your data, how you will ensure that the data is statistically sound, and then all of your plans for disseminating that data. So it's not necessarily about how you're implementing the conservation work, it's how you are collecting data regarding that work. And I don't know if I really explained that well, so.
Yeah, Chloe, I think you hit all the major themes. Because this is EPA, it's not NRCS, it's a little bit different in terms of how we're reporting. If you're used to reporting for our TA grants or something like that, when we think about the data collection piece and the environmental outcomes, what EPA is really asking for too is, how are you going to model that data, right? And how are we really quantifying what the outcomes are? So some of those things and just the plans and processes and methodologies should be captured in the sub-award quality assurance plan. But it doesn't get into the process for designing or implementing a practice or how it adheres to a practice standard or something like that. I'm not sure if that addressed the question, but certainly feel free to come off mute if you have some clarifying questions on that.
No, thank you. That covered it. I just was kind of, I guess I went through it too fast and I was kind of confused on how it was presented. So thank you. That did explain it. But I do have a follow-up. If they were working in a watershed that or somewhere that has another component that's funded at like through 319 or something like that, and we're collecting data, could that data be used to feedback in that project? I mean, it's just a hypothetical.
It's kind of a tricky one to say. Without saying it depends. I think if you're using some assumptions from that data and kind of extrapolating, you know what I mean? Or extrapolating data or, making some assumptions because, you don't necessarily have the data yet for this project. And, that's part of your approach to modeling, then perhaps. I think I said that in a really awkward way, but I hope that makes sense.
I think so.
Hey,
I'm just wondering because, a lot of times there's multiple sources of funding on bigger projects and stuff, and there could be some crossover or cross-pollination. So
I think the opportunity is there, but we would just probably want to clarify that with you once, you have a better sense, so that we make sure that, it's something that EPA is okay with as well. But I think broadly it's feasible. We would just need to look into it a little bit more closely.
grab a new site on the river, BK, or just supplement it if you could, some of the water quality samples.
thanks, Wes. That sounds good.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions from anyone? And yes, it's a quiet enough group that if you easier just to come off mute and ask your question, that's fine. Well, we don't need to, so go ahead.
Oh, no, that was just me. I was gonna say, I guess we covered everything.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. If you have further questions, here's Chloe's contact information and she'll be happy to help you. And we'll be doing another webinar in 2 weeks. So if you end up with additional questions, you can certainly come back then.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Yeah, like Meg said, reach out to me if you have questions, and looking forward to working with you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Great, thanks everyone.